My name is Nora Voss. I'm 29 years old, and 2 months ago my mother phoned me the night before my sister's engagement dinner to tell me to stay home. Not because I'd done a single thing wrong, not because there was some hidden dispute I wasn't aware of. She told me, and I remember this word for word, because I reread the message 4 separate times before setting the phone face down on my counter, that the venue only allowed a fixed number of guests and the restaurant reservation was already locked in, so it would simply be easier if I skipped this one. Did I understand? I did understand. I'd spent 26 years understanding. My sister is 2 years older than me. Growing up, she got the birthday parties with matching invitations, the college acceptance letter that got hung on the wall, the label my mother handed strangers, our high achiever. I was just the younger daughter, the quiet one, the one who somewhere around age 12 stopped asking to be part of things and started building something on her own instead. Nobody in my family ever thought to ask what that something was. 3 weeks ago, I was in my apartment in Nashville when my phone lit up with my grandmother calling. She never rings unless something's wrong. Her voice shook in a way I hadn't heard since my grandfather's funeral, except this wasn't grief. It was closer to shock. "Why didn't you say anything to any of us?" she asked. I said, "Say what, Grandma?" She said, "Sweetheart, it's in the paper. Let me start from the beginning. I was raised in a house where ambition wasn't handed out evenly. My mother had a preference, quiet but consistent, the way someone prefers one color to another, and she shaped her whole life around it. My sister got brand new outfits every first day of school. I wore her old clothes until I could afford my own. This isn't a story about being poor. We were fine financially. It was a decision, a small one on any given day. But 18 years of small decisions stack up into something you can actually measure. The one thing nobody in that house ever noticed was my sense of taste. I know how that sounds, but I was the kid who could tell the difference between my mother's summer tomato sauce, made with garden tomatoes, and her winter version but made from a can. I could taste salted butter versus unsalted in a bite of something. I knew instinctively when a dish was missing acid or needed more fat. My mother found this irritating. My sister thought it was odd. My father, not a cruel man, but not an especially observant one either, just figured I was fussy about food. By 17, I knew cooking was going to be my career, and not the casual kind, not catering, real restaurant work, the kind where you lie awake at 2 a.m. obsessing over a sauce and scribble notes in the dark so the idea doesn't slip away. I told my parents when college applications were due. My mother's reply was a printed list of pre-law programs at 3 schools. My father said cooking was a nice hobby to have. My sister, 19 at the time, and already engaged to a man she'd later divorce, said, "You'd be standing all day. Doesn't that sound miserable?" I applied to the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park, New York, and told no one until my acceptance letter arrived. Even then, nobody put it in a frame. I worked the entire way through the program, juggling 2 part-time jobs and student loans, sharing an apartment with 4 classmates who practiced cooking on each other constantly, where Tuesdays turned into open tasting nights, and somebody always burned something around midnight. It was the first place I ever truly felt like I belonged. After finishing, I staged unpaid at 3 New York restaurants, the way you do when you're building something and can't afford to be impatient. Eventually, I landed a paid role at a French-Japanese spot in the West Village, under a chef who spoke almost entirely in criticism and almost never in praise, and who remains the best teacher I've ever had. 3 years in, he recommended me to a colleague opening a new restaurant in Nashville. I relocated, took the sous chef job, and 18 months later was promoted to head chef. The restaurant is called Wisteria. I never told my family any of this, not out of secrecy, but because they'd stopped asking a long time before, and I'd stopped offering things to people who didn't want them. My mother knew I cooked. She described it the exact same way she had when I was 17. Nora does something with restaurants, works in a kitchen here and there. Once, at a family event I actually showed up to, I heard her tell a friend, "We keep hoping she'll find something more stable. But that's how it is with creative types." Her friend nodded sympathetically. I smiled and went to help with the dishes, because old patterns are hard to shake. My sister's engagement dinner was held at Hargrove, one of the nicer restaurants near my family's town, about 40 minutes outside Nashville. Her fiancé is easygoing, uncomplicated, sells commercial real estate, coaches youth soccer on the side. They'd been together 2 years when she called to announce the engagement. Her exact words were, "We're doing dinner at Hargrove next Saturday, just so you know not to make other plans." I hadn't been invited. She was informing me so I wouldn't feel excluded by not being included. It was almost thoughtful in its own strange way. 2 days before the dinner, my mother sent the message about the guest count. I didn't reply. I went to work. Here's what I didn't know that night. 2 unrelated things were happening at once. First, Food and Wine magazine released its annual Best New Chefs list that morning, and I was on it. The full profile went live online at 8 a.m., complete with photos and a quote I'd given a writer 3 months earlier during an interview I'd agreed to, and then completely forgotten about, since sitting still and talking about myself has never come naturally to me. The quote read, "I grew up in a family where I went unseen. That's probably why I cook the way I do. Everything I make so it gets noticed." Second, Hargrove, the very restaurant hosting my sister's dinner, had sourced 3 dishes that night, 2 starters and the main course, from Wisteria's sister farm outside Nashville, a supplier we'd helped establish. The restaurant's operations manager, who'd dined at Wisteria twice and knew exactly who I was, had added a note about it on the evening's menu cards, including my name. I was working when my phone started buzzing. I ignored it, since I'm almost always working and rarely check messages mid-service. It was a Tuesday, fully booked, plus 2 private events. I didn't look until close to 11. There were 14 missed calls, 6 from my mother, 3 from my grandmother, 2 from an unfamiliar number that turned out to be my aunt on a new phone, and 1 from my sister, followed by a 47-second voicemail I'll get to. I sat on the back step outside the kitchen, still in my whites, and called my grandmother first. She picked up instantly. "Why didn't you tell any of us?" That's when I learned what had happened. She read me the entire Food and Wine piece over the phone, slowly, word by word, 73 years old, while I sat on cold concrete behind my restaurant at 11:15 at night, gripping the phone with both hands. When she finished, she said, "Honey, you're extraordinary, do you know that?" I said, "Thanks, Grandma." She said, "I've been telling people for years you'd do something remarkable. I just never knew what to say. Now I do." I'll tell you what happened at the dinner itself, since I wasn't there but heard it secondhand from my grandmother, my aunt who called the next morning barely containing her glee, and my cousin, who attended as someone's +1 and sent me a whispered, laughing voice memo at 1 in the morning. Dinner was set for 30 guests, mostly family from both sides, plus a few of the groom's co-workers. My mother had picked Hargrove specifically to impress his family, who apparently had money in a way that made her self-conscious and eager to overcompensate. The menu cards were already on the tables when guests arrived, and that's where the evening started going sideways. My future brother-in-law's older sister, who happens to write about restaurants for a regional magazine and takes food seriously, picked up her menu card, read the supplier note, and asked the table at large, "Does anyone here know Nora Voss?" My mother said, "Sorry." The woman held up the card. Nora Voss. She just made the Food and Wine Best New Chef list, and her restaurant supplied part of tonight's menu. That's genuinely impressive. My mother stared at the card, glanced at my sister, looked back down. "Voss is my maiden name," she finally said. "Is she your daughter?" According to my cousin, the silence that followed lasted long enough to answer the question by itself. "She's our younger one," my mother eventually said. "She's in the food business." By the time the first course landed, 7 members of the groom's family, all seated together, had already pulled up the article on their phones. The photo, taken in Wisteria's kitchen, shows me in my chef's coat in front of the pass, not quite smiling, looking straight at the camera with an expression that says, "I know exactly where I stand, and I earned it." One of the cousins reportedly turned his phone toward my sister and said, "She looks just like you. Is this your sister?" My sister said, "Yes." According to my cousin, her voice sounded like a door swinging shut. Then my mother leaned toward the groom's mother, seated beside her, and said, not quite quietly enough, "We're very proud of her, of course. She's always been the independent type, doesn't stay in touch much, but that's just her personality." The woman nodded politely. My aunt, who has never once in my life held her tongue when given the chance to speak, said from across the table, "She stays in touch plenty with me and with Mom. And last I checked, she'd invited all of you to the restaurant twice and nobody showed up." My mother's smile went tight. "That's not... Didn't she send you a reservation for your birthday last year? I remember because she called asking for your schedule." That part was true. I'd arranged a dinner on the house for my parents and sister at my own restaurant. My mother said she'd think about it. They never came. The table fell into that particular silence that happens when strangers accidentally witness something they weren't meant to see. My future brother-in-law cleared his throat and said, "We should book a table ourselves. I hear Wisteria's excellent." My sister said nothing. The rest of the dinner carried on. Courses arrived and were cleared. The food, including the entree partly sourced from the farm I'd helped build up, was apparently very good. Conversation eventually moved elsewhere, as it does, but the article never really left the room. By night's end, 4 different guests had congratulated my mother on having a daughter just named one of the best new chefs in the country. Each time, she offered some version of "We're very proud" in a tone that sounded rehearsed 30 seconds before curtain. My sister's engagement wasn't the centerpiece of her own engagement dinner. I'm not saying that to be unkind. I didn't orchestrate any of it. I just existed, and I worked. And that work kept moving whether anyone in that room was paying attention or not. My sister's voicemail ran 47 seconds. The first 5 were dead silence then. "I don't even know how you managed to make this about you without being here. But somehow you did. Hope you're happy." A pause, her voice dropping. "Food and wine, Nora. You couldn't tell me yourself." Then she hung up. I played it twice, then deleted it. I hadn't made anything about me. I'd simply stopped hiding. I called my grandmother back the next morning and we talked for an hour straight. She admitted she'd been mispronouncing the restaurant's name for a decade, telling people I worked somewhere called Heartgrove, which doesn't exist. She laughed, telling me. I laughed too. She said she should have asked more, should have come to me directly instead of taking my mother's word for things. I told her she hadn't done anything wrong. She asked, "Will you cook for me sometime at your place?" I told her, "Grandma, I'll cook for you anywhere you want." She said, "Good, because I think I've been missing out." My mother called 2 days after the dinner. I let it ring to voicemail. Her message was in its own way a small masterpiece of avoidance. She hoped I was doing well. She thought the dinner had gone lovely. She thought we should catch up soon. Near the end. I know we haven't always been as supportive as we could have been. I think that's just been a communication issue. A communication issue. I listened while prepping for lunch service, hands moving through the familiar rhythm of mise en place. Butter melting in the pan, garlic just starting to turn translucent. I set the phone down and didn't call back. My father texted a week later, since he's never been one to call when texting is an option. Saw the article. Looks like things are going well for you. Your mother and I would like to visit the restaurant sometime, if that's all right. I read it on my break, coffee going cold in my hand. It wasn't an apology. It didn't touch the dinner I hadn't been invited to, or the years of she works in a kitchen somewhere, or the free dinner they'd turned down. It was just a door cracked open slightly. I sat with that message almost 2 weeks before replying, I'd like that. Let me know when you're coming through Nashville and I'll get you a table. Not forgiveness, not yet. Maybe never in the traditional sense, but a possibility, small enough to hold gently with both hands, the way you'd hold something fragile enough to shatter under too firm a grip. My sister still hasn't reached out. I've thought about what I'd say when she does, and I've decided I don't need a prepared speech, don't need a big moment. The truth doesn't require staging. It already happened. Here's what I know. I spent years cooking in rooms my family never once walked into. I sent invitations that went nowhere. I built a career nobody asked about, and none of it stopped me. None of it even slowed me down. If anything, being unwatched gave me a kind of freedom. No audience meant no one left to disappoint. You build differently when there's no one watching you do it. I'm standing in the Wisteria kitchen right now, 6:30 in the morning, 2 hours before my line cooks show up, watching that pale October gold light come through the east window. The farmer's market delivery arrived 40 minutes ago, a flat of late-season strawberries sitting on the counter, waiting for me to decide what they'll become. I'll figure it out. On the wall near the pass hangs a frame I put up 2 months back, holding a printed copy of the food and wine feature. Not because I need the validation, I already know what I do and what it costs to get here, but so I can look at it on quiet mornings when the work is just starting and remind myself it was real, that it happened, that I built it in a place where nobody was watching. If you're deep in your own version of that right now, cooking, building, writing, doing work your family never bothers to ask about, here's what I want you to hear. It is enough to be seen by your own work. It is enough to build something that knows your name, even if the people who should know it never learned it. Recognition might come, or it might not. Your family might understand eventually, or they might not. But what you're building is real either way. Don't cook for applause. Cook because the food is honest and the effort behind it is true. And somewhere in a dining room you can't picture yet, someone's going to take one bite and feel exactly what you meant by it. That's enough. It's always been enough. The strawberries are waiting, the kitchen is mine, and for the first time in a long while, I don't need permission to stand in the space I built for myself.